Gypsy-Rose Blanchard has made headlines once again, this time through an exclusive interview with Rolling Stone, where she opens up about her life after prison. She speaks of redemption, personal growth, and a new chapter as a mother, leaving behind a troubled past. But how much of what she's saying is the truth? In this video, we're not just taking her words at face value. We're diving deeper into what may seem like her mystery, but leaning into the questioning her narrative, dissecting the contradictions, and looking at the gap between what she claims and the reality of her actions. Is Gypsy really the woman she says she is? Or is her story more carefully crafted than we've been led to believe? One of the most telling statements from Gypsy is, "I don't want people to follow me because of the crime I committed. I don't want fans because they feel like what I did was right." At first glance, this seems like a reasonable request, a call for people to separate her crime from who she is now. But let's look closer. Gypsy frequently speaks about advocacy, yet she's never clearly defined what that means or whom she's advocating for. She often associates herself with abuse survivors, particularly those with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and occasionally brings up the struggles of incarcerated individuals. But despite all these claims, we haven't seen any concrete action. Since her release, there's been no evidence of Gypsy working with organizations or launching initiatives to actually support the causes she mentions.
I'm adjusting to all of this attention. I'm typically a shy kind of person in a social setting, so I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. But with the massive amount of platform that I have, the 6 million followers on Instagram and TikTok, I really want to get into advocacy work. I feel like with that big of a platform, with my story, I think it resonates with people because there's so many layers to my story. And I feel like, people feel if it could happen to her, it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. And I think it just has a lot of layers to it that interest people so much. Watching right now, please listen to me, heed my words, that you are not alone in this, situation. There are other ways out. I did it the wrong way.
Don't say that.
But I did. I did
really.
something wrong, and I paid my dues for it.
Oh, you mean that part?
Yes, the part of it, that part of it. Yeah.
Where are you going with this?
Yeah, no. So I did something.
Murder is wrong.
Yes, murder's wrong.
Her public efforts seem focused primarily on herself: media interviews, a reality show, and memoirs. Advocacy isn't just about telling your story. It's about turning your platform into action. Yet Gypsy's actions speak louder than her words. While she talks about advocacy, there's little to show for it. Instead of using her platform to help medical abuse survivors or create resources for them, she continues to focus on her own narrative. So when she says she doesn't want fans who celebrate her crime, we have to ask, does she want people to celebrate her survival, or does she just want them to buy into her story without questioning what she's doing with it? Another revealing part of the interview comes when Gypsy says, "When I was released in December 2023, I believed that I could and would live a normal life. And then I started to understand that it's not reality."
You were released from prison just a week ago.
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, that's just, like yesterday.
Right.
You served 8 years of a 10-year sentence. Number one, how are you doing? Number two, you say that prison changed you. How did that happen? Tell us about it.
Well, I'm doing great. I'm in New York City for the first time. I know I'm enjoying my freedom. I'm taking it day by day. It feels really, really nice to be out in the free world.
How did prison change you?
Prison actually was very helpful for me. I always say that if I didn't go to prison, I don't think that I would have acclimated to the outside world as easily as I have now.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
so your life was less the world than prison.
You said you were more free in prison.
Yes,
the freest you'd ever felt was the first.
This statement hints at the realization that living a normal life may be out of reach for her. But her actions since her release complicate this notion. Just months after being freed, she signed on for a reality TV show, Gypsy's Rules: Life After Lockup, and released a memoir about her life and the crime that brought her so much attention. These decisions don't align with someone seeking a quiet, private life. If Gypsy truly wanted privacy, her actions would reflect that. She would keep a low profile, stay out of the media, and focus on rebuilding her life away from the spotlight. Instead, she's chosen to continue sharing her story, expanding her presence in the public eye. This raises important questions about how sincere her desire for privacy really is. Is it genuine, or just part of a carefully managed public persona? Ultimately, Gypsy's story is a complex mix of personal ambition and public image crafting. While she talks about redemption and a fresh start, her actions suggest a different reality, where media presence and self-promotion are key. Her advocacy remains largely theoretical, and her desire for privacy doesn't seem to match her choices. As we peel back the layers of her narrative, we have to ask ourselves, how much of Gypsy's story is the truth, and how much is just another carefully curated chapter in the ongoing saga of her public life? Gypsy-Rose Blanchard, however, seems to be doing the opposite of what she claims, placing herself at the center of projects that inevitably keep her in the public eye. It's important to note that staying in the spotlight comes with complications, and Gypsy has certainly faced her share of intrusive photography and online speculation, especially regarding her personal life, including rumors about a possible pregnancy. But these issues are a natural consequence of the fame she continues to cultivate. Despite statements suggesting she desires a quieter life, her actions suggest something different.
Doesn't matter what you have been through in your life, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that good things still could happen for you, regardless of the horrors that you may have experienced in your life, because I think everyone relates to trauma in some form or fashion.
Well, for about 23 years of your life or so, it was basically, you could describe it as a nightmare, right?
Right.
How were you able to move on or move forward? Do you think about the past? Do you think about your mother?
I mean, of course. I'm in extensive therapy, and I work through my past by going through that therapy. And it's going to be a long journey. It's nothing that I will be able to get over in one day. So it's going to be a lifelong healing process for me.
This raises an important question. Is Gypsy truly seeking privacy, or is she attempting to control the narrative surrounding her story? The two desires aren't mutually exclusive, but they send very different messages. From the way she's approached her post-prison life, it appears Gypsy is more interested in managing how her story is told than disappearing from public view entirely. It's a delicate balancing act, but one that makes us wonder if she's tipping the scales toward publicity. One of the most telling statements from Gypsy comes when she says, "I didn't know how big this story was until I got out of prison." This offers some insight into her perspective on the public's fascination with her. She claims to have been unaware of the scope of attention her case generated. But that raises a major question. How could Gypsy not have known about the media storm surrounding her, especially when it was so widely covered during her incarceration? To put it into context, while she was in prison, her story was the subject of documentaries, podcasts, a major film starring Joey King, and a dramatization with Patricia Arquette. These were cultural moments that connected with the public consciousness. For her to now claim ignorance about the attention she received feels somewhat disingenuous, considering how heavily her story was discussed for years before her release. The timeline speaks for itself. Gypsy's story has been in the public eye for a long time, and even after her release, it continues to be shaped by media outlets. She acknowledges this, mentioning how the media has distorted her story. But the question remains, how much of her version of events is shaped by her memory versus how much of it is being filtered through the lens of others? Over the years, Gypsy's narrative has shifted, and the details of her relationship with her mother, the planning of her mother's death, and even her understanding of the abuse she endured have varied in interviews. This inconsistency raises doubts about the accuracy of her account and whether her memoir is really the definitive recounting of her experiences or just another interpretation. Her choice to work with ghostwriters also adds another layer of complexity. Ghostwriters bring their own perspectives to the table, meaning Gypsy's voice is inevitably filtered through them. So, how much of her story is truly her own? If her memoir is meant to reclaim her narrative, it should aim to clarify these discrepancies. Instead, it exists in a gray area, a mixture of memory, emotion, and selective storytelling, leaving readers to question how much of Gypsy's account can be fully trusted. A striking quote from Gypsy is, "I look back on my past and I'm proud of what I did. I am very ashamed of it, so I honestly get offended whenever someone says things." This reflects her desire to distance herself from the glorification of her crime.
You have the nose work and the hair and all of that. What does that mean for you?
I had been wanting to go through a physical transformation to sort of separate myself from the old Gypsy. Right now, I'm very comfortable in the way I look, and I'm proud, and I have confidence now. I have the support of my family and a wonderful boyfriend to back me up on everything.
While she acknowledges the shame she feels, that admission only holds weight when her actions align with her words. In reality, Gypsy's role in her mother's death wasn't purely passive. It's one thing to express regret, but another entirely to show genuine accountability for the events that unfolded. Gypsy-Rose Blanchard's involvement in the tragic death of her mother, Dee Blanchard, is far from a passive act. From initiating contact with Nicholas Godejohn online to carefully strategizing the plan to escape her mother's control, Gypsy played an active role in orchestrating the events that led to Dee's murder. While she often portrays herself as a victim caught up in a chaotic series of circumstances, it is crucial to recognize the level of agency she held throughout the entire process. Gypsy's narrative has frequently focused on the abuse she endured from her mother, medical procedures, emotional manipulation, and isolation, painting a picture of a helpless victim. However, acknowledging her suffering does not absolve her of the responsibility she holds for the crime committed. Gypsy rarely delves into the moral implications of her decision to involve Godejohn, a man with known mental health challenges, in such a violent act. Instead, she tends to deflect much of the responsibility for the killing onto him while focusing on her own suffering. This deflection obscures the fact that Gypsy was not a passive bystander in the murder of her mother. She was an active participant in orchestrating the tragic events. Her repeated emphasis on survival, while important, often seems to overshadow the accountability she should take for the consequences of her actions.
Nicholas Nick Godejohn, Gypsy-Rose Blanchard's ex-boyfriend who was convicted of murdering her mother Dee Blanchard, is still in prison amid Gypsy's release. Gypsy and Nick met on a dating website for Christian singles in 2013 when Gypsy was 21 years old. They spoke for 2 years strictly online, developing a relationship in which they discussed starting a new life together, including getting married and starting a family. They then met for the first time in person in 2015 when they went to see the movie Cinderella. Their second in-person meeting was in June of that year when Nick Godejohn traveled from Wisconsin to Missouri to act out their plan of killing Gypsy's mother, Dee. Godejohn would later say that he believed killing Dee was, quote, imperative to ensuring he and Gypsy could spend their lives together. On June 9th, 2015, after Dee fell asleep, Godejohn entered the house and while Gypsy hid in the bathroom, he stabbed Dee Blanchard to death.
Acknowledging her shame without confronting the full scope of her responsibility, including the devastating impact on her family and the broader public perception of abuse victims, feels incomplete. True accountability goes beyond simply acknowledging guilt. It requires sustained reflection and genuine attempts to make amends. Gypsy's public statements often appear to fall short of this deeper level of engagement. She acknowledges her shame, but the way she continues to frame her story and her role in the murder seems designed to minimize her culpability. Her acknowledgement of guilt feels more like a performance than a reflection of true remorse, leaving a critical part of the process of healing and accountability missing. Gypsy claims, "Nobody's ever come up to me with anything negative to say. They don't have the..."
Just kind of feel like, hey, that's not good for someone's mental health, and I turn them off for my mental health. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Me Too side. But this statement starkly contrasts with the reality of her online presence. While she does face harassment, including photos taken without her consent and relentless trolling on platforms like Reddit and Facebook, it's important to recognize the contradiction in her actions. These invasions of privacy are undoubtedly wrong, but Gypsy has actively contributed to the very scrutiny she criticizes. It's not just about being visible. It's about sharing intimate, personal moments with her audience. She has chosen to release her memoir, collaborate on a Lifetime documentary, and participate in high-profile interviews, all of which keep her story at the forefront of public attention. By sharing personal milestones like pregnancy announcements and paternity test results, Gypsy has helped create a narrative where the public feels entitled to know the details of her life. Her participation in these media projects suggests that her relationship with the public eye is not as adversarial as she claims. She has consistently taken steps to maintain her visibility, even as she criticizes the media scrutiny she faces. This inconsistency between her words and actions raises important questions about the extent to which Gypsy is genuinely seeking privacy, or whether she is in fact actively shaping and controlling her own narrative for public consumption. Gypsy-Rose Blanchard's journey since her release from prison has been filled with contradictions, especially when it comes to her relationship with the public. On one hand, she faces relentless harassment with invasive photos, rumors, and online trolling. These are all unjust and harmful forms of scrutiny that no one should endure. Yet on the other hand, Gypsy herself continues to keep her story in the public eye, suggesting that her desire for privacy is not as genuine as she claims. If privacy were truly her priority, stepping away from social media and reality TV altogether would be a logical step. Instead, Gypsy seems to be walking a tightrope, balancing her frustration with public scrutiny while carefully curating her narrative to suit her own purposes. This is where the contradiction becomes apparent. Gypsy expresses dissatisfaction with her public persona, saying, "There's Gypsy that my family knows, that my partner knows, that I know, but you're in the same body, but I just kind of feel like nobody really knows the real me."
Again, this is just a personal choice that I'm prioritizing my own mental health, my family. I don't think there's anything wrong with having occasional check-ins with yourself that, hey, if you need to pull back a little bit, that's okay. If you want to take a step forward a little bit, that's okay. But knowing when to do so is probably the healthiest option. That's when you really know yourself.
This sentiment is deeply personal, drawing a line between the public image created by media coverage and the private person she wants to be recognized as. However, when we examine her actions, the question arises, does Gypsy truly want to distance herself from the public image, or is she still leaning into it for personal gain? Let's look at the facts. Gypsy claims she is building a private life, but her actions tell a different story. Participating in a reality TV show like Gypsy's Rules Life After Lockup contradicts that goal. Reality TV thrives on showcasing personal lives, often dramatized for entertainment purposes, and Gypsy is no exception. Her pregnancy, relationships, and even mundane moments are shared as part of the narrative she chooses to display. Furthermore, releasing her memoir places her past in the spotlight once again. While Gypsy may view this as her opportunity to tell her side of the story, it also ensures that her presence in the public sphere remains strong. Memoirs, by nature, invite readers into one's most vulnerable and personal moments, and once those moments are out there, they are no longer private. Another element to consider is Gypsy's social media activity. She claims to use her platforms primarily for promotional purposes, but social media inherently fosters a sense of connection with an audience. Sharing personal milestones like pregnancy announcements and other private moments creates a sense of intimacy, making it more difficult for the public to separate the real Gypsy from the public persona she has crafted. While Gypsy may indeed be a different person behind the media coverage, her actions make it hard to discern where the real Gypsy ends and the public figure begins. Gypsy also speaks about her desire to make amends for the past, notably with Habitat for Humanity, a charity her mother once scammed. Her attempt to volunteer seems like a symbolic effort to redeem herself. However, the timing of this attempt is crucial. It was tied to the filming of her reality show. This raises questions about her true intent. Was it a genuine attempt at making amends, or was it part of a larger effort to craft a redemptive narrative for the cameras? Her framing of the situation, particularly how she describes the rejection she faced from Habitat for Humanity, shifts the responsibility away from her and onto those who refused her involvement. By casting herself as the victim of their rejection, Gypsy avoids taking full responsibility for her actions and the long-term consequences of her past. In these ways, Gypsy's narrative continues to blur the lines between seeking redemption and maintaining control over her image. She wants to be seen as a survivor, as someone who has grown and changed, but her actions often speak to a more calculated effort to shape the story in her favor. Until there is greater transparency about her motivations and a more consistent alignment between her words and actions, the question of whether she truly seeks privacy or just a more favorable public image remains unanswered. Forgiveness is not something that is owed. It is earned through consistent, meaningful actions over time. Gypsy's attempt to volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, especially when tied to the filming of her reality show, may not have been the most thoughtful or effective approach to making amends. The fact that the organization declined her offer suggests that her history with them, combined with her ongoing public profile, made her attempt feel more performative than genuine. Instead of reflecting on why her offer was rejected, Gypsy seems to focus on feeling wronged by the decision. This highlights a recurring theme in her post-incarceration life. Her efforts to move forward are often overshadowed by actions that come across as self-serving rather than redemptive. Making amends is a process that requires careful, private and consistent effort, but Gypsy's approach often lacks that level of sincerity. Her public persona and the way she shares parts of her life seem to be at odds with the more private, reflective actions needed for genuine growth. Gypsy's acknowledgement of public curiosity in her life, while accepting it, might be seen as resigned, it's patan. Yet it also hints that she leans into the very scrutiny she claims to avoid. Take her relationship with her partner Kent, for example. On the surface, their relationship seems stable. They've built a life together, and Gypsy is expecting a child. But then, she made the decision to post the results of her paternity test online. If privacy truly was her goal, why share something so personal? This decision to publicize the paternity test results only fueled the online speculation, raising questions about boundaries. Sharing intimate moments with the public might be framed as transparency, but it often invites the kind of scrutiny Gypsy claims to despise. The more details she shares, the harder it becomes for her to control the narrative. While Gypsy's life with Kent could have been an opportunity to establish a quieter, more private chapter, decisions like this reveal that she's still struggling to balance her public image with her personal life. For someone who claims to desire a more private existence, this contradiction continues to play out. It's a struggle between wanting to move beyond the public eye and still actively participating in the media-driven narrative. As we analyze Gypsy Rose Blanchard's post-incarceration journey, we see that while she may express a desire for privacy, her actions seem to suggest a more complicated relationship with the spotlight. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the layers of Gypsy's recent Rolling Stone interview, how her words spark debate, how her actions raise questions, and how her story continues to captivate. Stay critical, stay curious, and we'll see you next time for more in-depth discussions.